Hey, I'm Cliff,
And I'm Susan.
and welcome to the Cliff and Susan podcast.
We are a married music duo right here in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we share our life as musicians, as small business owners. We bring on several different personalities, business owners, musicians, and we're excited about our episode today. Wherever you're watching, make sure you hit the like, subscribe, follow, smash the button. Wherever it is, we would love a follow, and we'll follow you back and connect with you guys all over the world through our podcast.
That's right. Today, we have a guest with us, and it is Ainsley Meldrum, our content coordinator.
She is here in the studio. We're excited to have her. And Ainsley, we're going to tell her story, share what she's been working on in her life. She's also an Arkansan. And so Ainsley started working with us and for us after meeting us at the Arkansas CMAs. Gosh, I mean, it must have been 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And we'll tell her story. But welcome, Ainsley. How are you today?
I'm good. How are y'all?
We're good. When it took us a minute to set up all these cameras. We're getting fancy on production.
We're figuring it out, though.
We are
I think
figuring
we've
it
got
out. Ainsley, we're so excited to have you today. And I reached out to her yesterday and I said, let's talk about where you are in your career and your aspirations with your future. And but real quick, Ainsley worked for us when we launched our Yadaloo Music Arts Festival. She was our intern, and I quit calling her our intern because
we only would introduce her as
our intern, which I think is a cool title. However, she is now she graduated from here out in West Little Rock. You went to school. What was the school name?
It was Quest Academy of West Little Rock, but they've changed it now. So my class ring has a non-existent school on it.
Well, that was impossible to remember.
Yeah,
Quest Academy of
Most people just call it Quest or Quest Academy.
Yeah. Well, so she graduated and she went to the University of North Alabama. And what is the program that you're studying?
Entertainment industry.
Okay.
So my emphasis, there's two different. It's kind of like a fork in the road of what you can go into. So I'm on the business side of things. So it's the business emphasis, or you can go into the technology emphasis.
So I imagine, I would love to think that you working with us kind of helped you further define your path as, into the music industry. Is that true? I mean, I'm sure you got a little bit of experience of the good, bad, and the ugly of the industry whenever we were launching a festival. But how did you decide the program that there at UNA?
Well, my mom actually found UNA, and I told her, I was like, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to like it. I was set on MTSU, which is Middle Tennessee State University.
Okay.
And it's in Murfreesboro, which is pretty close to Nashville. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go there. And
sure.
I toured, and I was like, actually, I kind of don't like this. And, we went down within the same day. Actually, we drove from Murfreesboro to Florence, and whenever I toured, I just fell in love with the school, and I was like, maybe you were kind of right. I guess.
Don't you hate it when you're like, mom's right? As I've gotten older, moms are right, and so just embrace it. Ainsley.
They know things, I guess.
University of North Alabama, great music department. We'll talk more about how you brought us down there. But kind of, tell us a little bit more about when did you know that music industry was kind of where you wanted to head with your degree and your future? Yeah,
so whenever I was 14, I think, I started playing guitar, and I was like, maybe I could be a producer or something like that. Maybe I could get into sound production and concert production even. And I sat in a studio that I was invited to by John Rainey, who's in
friend of ours.
Yeah.
Great producer and engineer.
Yeah, he's
award-winning.
Yeah, he is. An absolutely fantastic guy. But I did not like sitting in a studio. I was like, this is not it for me. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? And then I was like, well, obviously artists have people on their team. Artists have, there's so many different levels to what goes into making a show what it is.
Yes.
And it's not just the artist. You can't just throw things on stage and expect it to go how you want it to. So I figured, well, I guess I'll be one of those people that
Well,
it's
and
working
I'm
behind
sure,
the scenes.
and us, we grassroots Star Festival, so I'm sure you got a little bit of behind the scenes exposure to producing a large event. I say large. We had a boutique festival on the banks of the Arkansas River, Yadaloo Music and Arts Festival. For those of you who haven't heard about that before on some previous podcast episodes, but Ainsley, we just loved watching your evolution of you. Like, you're so reliable. You're such a hard worker. You accept growth opportunities, and it's just been so cool to have you on our team. And I reached out to her yesterday and I said, hey, I have an idea for a podcast episode. You're going into your sophomore year at UNA, and I'd love to tell. First of all, I feel terrible when we're walking around at events, and half the time I don't introduce you.
Well,
and
we're terrible.
hey.
I'm terrible at introductions. So is Ainsley. It's
You mean
really
so is
so. No, I'm sorry. So is Susan. Yeah,
I'm good at introducing.
Yeah, you're very good at
she's
it.
become
actually.
very good because she's like,
just took-
by the way, I am, and I'm like, oh god, I feel terrible. But I told her, I was like, let's introduce everybody to what you're doing with your career and talk about the music industry. And you mentioned it just a second ago. Artists have teams, and as independent artists like we are, Cliff and I have just now started to build our team. You were our first team member, honestly.
Well, and I like how you said you hated being in the studio, so we just drug you to our studio. So I'm sure.
Well, I just hated sitting around listening to the same song 20,000 times.
Yeah.
Because that's like, we were mixing, and John Rainey's a great producer. He's a great mix engineer. However, I did not enjoy sitting and listening to the same thing over and over and over
Well,
again.
and also you being a fly on the wall versus actually producing
Yeah.
it's like a totally
Right.
different mental headspace. As a producer, and I'm not one, but Cliff is. I mean, that is a true art form behind
Right.
the desk, mixing and listening and adding and
Yeah.
and frequencies and all of the things that you
Well,
obviously
and
probably would want to be.
I can tell you, as a mix engineer and a producer, like there's a certain level that you get to, and like most people literally just hear the whole picture. And I can hear the whole picture, but when you're pinpointing
Your
just
ear
one
dissects
certain
things.
thing,
Yeah.
you completely zone out the other things. And so you really can zone out and not have to think
Yeah.
about it too much.
Well, I love that you were able to find an opportunity before you went down a certain trajectory in life, and you figured that out. And I think that's so important for young adults whenever they're looking at what do I want to do with the quote unquote the rest of my life.
Right.
I went to school for math and science and didn't even think there was an option for me with music. And luckily, I found a really cool career path. But for me, I remember I had an internship at an electrical engineering company. And I went in there and sat behind a desk and watched AutoCAD and like learned how to, and I was like, not for me,
Yeah.
and that was great. I mean, it was a paid internship on a summer break. I'm sure it was similar to what you did within the music industry there. And so shout out to John Rainey and for helping you
Yeah.
figure out that wasn't what you
Yeah.
wanted to do, but you have now, found your sweet spot. And so let's talk about that. So, UNA, University of North Alabama, is right next to Muscle Shoals.
Right.
And a lot of you guys know that Cliff and I have released or are releasing a couple of songs that we recorded at Muscle Shoals at Fame Recording. But tell us about the program that, or not the program, but the class that you were in that led us to you contacting us to come down there, and tell us about that story. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so it was a class called Concert Promotion and Touring, and it's with the professor Alex Witchek. I love him as a professor. He's great. And at the beginning of the semester, he was like, hey, just so you know, at some point you're going to be producing your own show. And I was like, well, that's kind of scary. I kind of don't really do that.
But you had been working with it.
Yeah, I mean,
I imagine some people didn't have that experience.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I kind of took charge of the group because I had had the most experience in, not really producing my own show, but standing behind somebody who does it well, which is obviously you two. And knowing all the things we needed, and obviously he gave us a checklist of like, hey, you need to make sure you have this. There was one group, and I won't say who it was. I'm not really sure they'd listen to a podcast, but either way, I won't say. But there was one group that got down to the week before their
project,
their project, and they hadn't booked
an artist.
And well, they had booked the artist, they hadn't booked the venue.
Oh,
And so they just forgot about
Well,
that
see,
whole
those
thing.
are learning moments in life, Ainsley.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of already had the leg up. You had a little experience and knew
Yeah.
the timeline of promoting,
Yeah.
producing, you know, booking and all that. So I'm sure they will not make that mistake again, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because I remember they came up to me and they were like, "So how did you get the
The venue?
venue? You mean you haven't booked the venue and it's the week before your show?" And they were like, "Well, I mean, I thought I did." And I'm like, "Oh no, this is terrible."
So with the booking of us,
Right.
it was our exciting opportunity to go down and see Florence. We wanted to see you. We kept saying, we're
Yeah.
going to come down and
Yeah.
see you.
Yeah.
And you had been telling us about how gorgeous the campus was, but then you called us up, hey, can I book you for my
Yeah.
for my class? And I'm like, yes, that would be
Well, and
so
we'd
fun.
we'd never been to Florence or Muscle Shoals, so we were exciting for that prospect.
Yeah, so we went. You showed us the campus. We did the show. I mean, we had a good little number of folks
Yeah.
show up for your class. I
Yeah.
mean, numbers based on what you told me, they were pretty good.
Yeah.
The
How stressed were you going into it?
Oh man, I was like, I was fully prepared to have like 5 people at the show. I was like, luckily Cliff and Susan probably won't be too upset about it and they'll adapt to it. But I was like, it'll be really embarrassing for me if like they've taught me all these things and then I have 5 people
well,
at the show.
and to be
Well.
fair, like, you know, Florence isn't a huge town,
Right.
and I mean, we're not any kind of household name over here. We have
Well,
never
that's another
played
thing.
any
That was
shows
another
down
learning
there.
curve. is
Yeah.
I definitely had to figure out how to promote an artist that people didn't know.
Yeah.
So it was a brand new clean slate, whereas other people were working with artists who
Yeah.
had played Florence multiple times, or they grew
Yeah,
up in
local
Florence.
artists that
Right.
had a little bit of
That's
a following.
that's so cool, and I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, as we're trying to get out to new markets, what did you find work, and what do you think would help artists when they're going into new markets? I mean, I kind of know the answer, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. I mean, I saw posters of our
Yeah.
we rolled up to eat, and there was like posters everywhere, even laying on the ground. I was like,
Yeah.
Laying on
has
the ground.
postered this town with Cliff and Susan. It was
Yeah.
so funny.
I went around and handheld like put posters up. I printed off 50 at my friend's apartment complex.
Yeah.
Because originally, see, this a little bit of backstory on this. Originally, one of my group members was supposed to get those printed, and it was supposed to look really nice and be on this nice paper. And then, like the week before the show, I was like, "Hey, have you done that?" No, I thought you were gonna do that, and I was like,
The importance
my
of a good,
goodness.
reliable team, right?
yeah, and I was like, well, I guess I'll do it. So I
Yeah.
spent one day I think I spent like a good 3 hours
Printing.
putting up,
Oh,
like
and-
printing, putting up posters, going in. Some of the restaurants were like, have you ever bought anything from here before? And I was like, no.
I'm sorry. Well, so posters. Okay, but you were also on a budget situation. Like you're a college
Right.
kid, and we're a college student. I say student, say kid, young lady. But you know, with a new artist, I feel like you've probably learned and or seen me do it, or just by nature you understand where we are in 2024 with digital advertising, and I think it's smart. I would love your thoughts on it. It's kind of more of a question than a statement, but like, how important would it be for an artist to create like even just a static image or a, hey, Florence, we're Cliff and Susan. We're coming to do a show at UNA. We'd love to see you there. We play country rock and roll, and we're going to do a fun show, share some of our new music off of our album. Short little 30-second, and then drop a pin on Florence. And then whatever, if it's $100, $200 budget, just let that play for 2 weeks, driving ticket sales and or just awareness for that artist. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that was really helpful to me was I mean I created the poster that got printed. So one of the best things that y'all did for me essentially is you said, here's our kit of everything that you need, of multiple photos. It's not just like 3 of the same photos. You have landscape, you have, you know, vertical, you have just multiple different photos that I could use. And then I made about 8 flyers, and I picked one that I liked.
Cool.
And you know, I made one that was horizontal, so it could go on a big billboard type looking screen. And one of the biggest things I think for me that's helpful, and just for any artist to know, is you're selling yourself as the product. So, you know, what do you want them to know about you? They don't necessarily need your whole life story, but they need to know what you deliver They need to see your fan base and, you know, if people are dancing, are you a background show or are you, you know, a person who gets the crowd going?
Well, I'm going to stop you there because I love that you said that. You softballed this up for me because, first of all, Media Kit. What I sent you, just for those artists listening or anybody just interested in the process of how this works, like I have a Dropbox folder where I put all of my approved, meaning press worthy, we wouldn't mind them. And so many people go and find these old photos of us. I'm like, that wasn't in my Media Kit, but you know, we're excited for most opportunities. So that's not terrible. But it was cool that you used our Media Kit, which is just a Dropbox link that I share that has photos, some videos. It has a short bio and a long bio in there, and I keep that current. And then it has our logo kit. So if you wanted to pull in our logo, anything that a press or media person, show, promoter, whatever would potentially need, I have one link. And when they're like, do you have any pictures? I'm like, yes, here's my Media Kit. Feel free to use whatever you find in there that makes sense for your promotion. And then that's so easy. And I have it saved, that little link saved in a note on my phone. I actually made a little bit.ly link, so it was like super easy. I just send that out. And we were so excited to be there, you know, be able to come down and be a part of your story and your journey and your education. And it was really cool. The thing that happened the next day was we went to see Muscle Shoals Fame. We took the
Fame
backstage studio tour. Studio. And while we were, you told us about it, and you had actually been there, and I think you got right here in the studio. We have one of those things. You had given us some souvenirs, and you're like, you got to come see this.
Yeah.
Well,
Little
Cliff and I had
coasters.
actually watched the Muscle Shoals documentary, and then we were like, holy moly, like this place is incredible. Now we knew kind of, most people know Muscle Shoals, but we highly recommend watching that documentary.
Yeah,
there's actually an HBO series that came out. I think that's separate from that. That's new.
really?
Yeah,
They just released at the end of May this
I need
year.
to watch it.
I saw it today when I was tagging Fame, and I was like, oh wait, what? That's not the same thing. But anyway, it sounds like there's a second great documentary on Muscle Shoals. And when we realized the history, we were like, we have to go. So at 9 a.m. the next morning, before we drove back to Little Rock, we went over there and took the backstage tour. And you get to hear all of the amazing stories about just what happened in that incredible 60-year studio. And while we were there, Cliff and I were like, and I raised my hand. I'm pretty talkative, and I'm like asking all the questions. I'm the front row student, by the way. I'm just sitting in the front row kind of person. Yes.
But I'm glad you did, though.
Yeah, because I said, can independent artists record here? And they said, well, actually, yes, and we're more affordable than you realize. And so after the tour, we went and spoke with Spencer Coates, who is the tracking engineer on the songs that we ended up tracking and producing. And anyway, we just found an opportunity. So thank you, Ainsley, for being the reason we found Muscle Shoals. And we've got our song Into the Mystic, our take on that very well-known and loved Van Morrison tune, our favorite Van Morrison song. We're excited. And so you got, I was a little timid about having more than just us in the studio because I hadn't built that relationship with them.
Right.
But you did get to come in at the end after we had already done the thing. And
I do wish we had gotten some more, like, just kind of little snippet B-roll of us recording.
Well, there again, I was trying to be respectful and not just walk in and not know and like misstep with just how so I learned a lot. We always learn when we go to new opportunities. And so we built a relationship with them, and I do expect that we'll go back and record, but we did Into the Mystic and then our duet, Waiting on You, Waiting on Me. And what were your thoughts about, like, did you see anything while you were watching him mix it down and stuff? Like, what was your take on Fame?
I mean, it was really cool because I hadn't been. Whenever I went to go see Fame, I didn't do the tour. I actually haven't done the tours yet. I just haven't had a time to do it. But that was my first time being like actually in the studio, and so they have the double pane glass and
of course,
and all of that, and that was cool. But just watching especially the foghorn part was probably like my favorite part to watch.
Oh, are you talking about when he was recording
Into the Mystic? It's got the foghorn in it.
It's a sound that's made on the guitar. And Cliff, I didn't realize you were there while Cliff was tracking that part.
Yeah, because I was like, well, we got to do a foghorn sound, and so I just put it on distortion and really heavy reverb, and I did a slide, and I think it made a pretty convincing foghorn sound.
It was a cool take on it for sure, of I have no idea what they actually, like, what Van Morrison used in that.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm not sure if it was an actual foghorn, but it's very.
It could have been.
In 1971, when it was recorded, I don't
They
think...
probably walked outside with
It
their...
could have been. It could have been a tuba in a hallway.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Who
I
knows?
wish somebody could tell us what that was. Well, cool. So let's talk about... I just kind of want to bring this back to the music industry as a whole, because I am geeking out to your syllabus or syllabi. I don't know what
there was
it is.
a lot of stuff that you were telling us right before we started filming that was really interesting.
Well, yesterday I said I want to interview you, tell you your story, introduce everybody to Ainsley Meldrum, our one of our star gold. We have 2 team members now. Ainsley, you were our first team member, and of course we have Denise over in the Philippines, who is our virtual assistant. And so I said, let's talk about artists. Let's talk about major label artists and what teams they need to be successful. And then let's talk about how independent artists can develop their own team. With independent artists these days, it's just, it's a challenge to do it all. I mean, you're trying to release music, book shows, pay your bills, figure out how to find a producer, and then release a song, and what's the release strategy, and how do you get playlisted, and then, oh my gosh, TikTok and Instagram, we got to do that, because if you don't have that out there, then do you even exist? And all of these things that are a challenge for a one person, or maybe in our case 2 people who are trying to do this.
Well, even as a team, it's challenging to be on brand and on point all the time. I mean,
so let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. So I went to Ainsley. I said, hey, let's talk about what you've learned. And even some of the conversations before we started the podcast, I already learned a few things. So let's talk about the team that, and I have a list here because I asked ChatGPT. I was like, as a major music label, give me a list of all the team members. And I could have done some homework with books, and I'm sure you have all of this resource that you've learned at college. So kind of let's run through what a team would look like for a major label artist and what you've learned. And then let's kind of maybe talk about how independent artists can develop their own team.
Right. So obviously there's a lot of moving parts to make sure that your group is going to run smoothly, and you kind of have to be prepared in any of those roles for things to go wrong. One of my biggest things that I see in like independent artists even is they have family members or they have friends being their artist manager or their tour manager or their booking agent, essentially. And while that's all fine and dandy, the problem with that a lot of times is they don't necessarily always have the skills of what you need. Obviously, if your mom or dad was a booking agent 5 years ago, they're going to know and have those connections, and that's fine. But most of the time, you don't really need to have mom or dad or your best friend. Yeah. Because it doesn't end up working out for you, and it ends up causing an issue down the road sometimes. But with that list of roles, you have to figure out who is going to be looking out for your best interests. And while you might be sitting there going, well, mom and dad look out for my best interests, they do in pretty much all cases, but
maybe they don't have the skill sets.
Yeah, they may not have the connections that you need, or they may be your right hand man to help you with other things or help you make decisions. That's fine. But as an artist manager especially, or a tour manager or a booking agent, you really need somebody who has those connections. Sometimes you might be booking with somebody who is local to that area. So if I wanted to book in Nashville, I'm going to call up somebody I know in Nashville who does booking and say, what would you recommend for me as an artist to play at da-da-da venues? Or, do you think I'm big enough to play at these venues? Because that's another thing is whenever you have those people, their whole goal is, or even a promoter, their goal is to make money, just like your goal is to make money.
Butts in seats, yeah. Well, so from the top on, just a list of the roles that team members and their roles for a major artist. And then I want to come back to that because, like, as an indie artist, number one, people need to be paid.
Right.
So you may not have the budget to hire, and then you're trying to figure out how, if you're a multi-member band, I see a lot of bands who are successful. Each member takes a different responsibility and acts as that. But there again, and I'll come back to this, but educating yourself. There's so many resources nowadays to learn how to do this the correct way. and find agents, find managers. I don't think that a manager up front for an independent artist is necessarily super important until later. So, but let me run through this list real quick. So, artist managers kind of like, to me, they're like the overarching that they manage the whole team kind of thing.
Right. For lack of a better word, it's kind of like a babysitter.
Yeah.
Almost.
Well, you think it's babysitter. Well, I also think
that's kind of what it is in some ways.
Well, and I think it's also the CEO of the company. Like the visionary and the artist is the artist, but the CEO of the company, if you think of like in a corporate C-level executive structure, I think the artist manager probably is like CEO. And an A&R, artist and repertoire, they would identify and develop the musical style and the artist, like what genre, where are we headed with this production, what do we want to sound like, and then they would help them with like selecting songs and arranging collaborations and that kind of thing. The marketing director, which I think this is interesting, marketing director is like overarching everything: social media, digital, press releases, branding, advertising. It could be TV, radio, all of that. On down on this list was social media manager, which is to me is kind of like probably would report to the marketing director, but then you got a publicist. We actually have hired a publicist now. So they would be helping with public relation, getting more media presence, reviews of their music, developing the official press release whenever a new song's coming out or any notable appearances that happen. Tour manager, and you've already talked about this, but the tour manager would organize and oversee the tour. So the logistics of booking the venue, they would work hand in hand with the booking agency, right?
Right.
And they would be doing like, travel arrangements, coordinating with the local promoters, advancing the show, making sure that you talked to me earlier about making sure that like the equipment is there and all of they call it a rider on a contract. But when we booked the major acts for our Yadaloo, it's like we needed to know what equipment they required so that we had it there for them. Otherwise, they wouldn't play if we didn't have the big artists. They are like, this is like down to the exact model and make of the board.
Well, and so, some of those, I like we've talked to a lot of artists, and they're like, some of that we just throw in there just to see if we can get it.
Yeah.
It's not that you always have to be like, no, if you don't have it, we can't play.
And but there again, the tour manager would handle
the preference.
Yeah, the tour manager will handle those questions in details and make sure that the run of show is ready to go. The creative director gave me this one, but I'm like, that to me, it says oversees the visual aspects of the artist brand. So
it's kind of like a publicist, I guess.
Well, actually, I think they're more like a marketing director, in my opinion, but it says music videos, photo shoots, stage design, and the overall visual identity. So what does the brand look and feel like, And that feeds into the social media and the marketing director. But I thought creative directors are really cool. I love that idea of a potential team member position. Booking agent, digital strategist, and, those two, well, we know what a booking agent is.
I guess.
Digital strategist is really not just social media, but it's the website, SEO, online advertising. I mean, and that gets me, that rings my bell when we start talking about digital, because if we don't have a good digital presence from all angles, not just social media, but your website needs to have its own converting, it needs to be professional and convert, and then all of it is under digital. Then the last two were legal advisor and financial advisor, and entertainment lawyers and legal teams, obviously contracts. All of that's very important for. Now that's pretty much the full enchilada that I found for for major label artists. So how do you do that as an indie artist? And what are the pros and cons? Let's talk about that. Pros and cons of hiring a team when you're ready. First of all, when you're ready and have a budget. I always like to say, you need to start your LLC and build a business and all of these things we teach in our Entertainers Academy for indie artists. For us, we're just now able to start to afford a VA and start paying some folks like a publicist. But what do you think as an indie artist, what the pros and cons of starting to hire a team and getting a team together would be?
Well, certainly it takes quite a bit off of your plate. I know you never stop working, it seems like. Both of y'all are always up at all hours, it seems like. But, I mean, it allows the artists themselves to kind of hone what they want their show to be like and hone their craft of what they're good at. And a lot of times, another thing about artists is a lot of creatives do not have a type A mindset. They're not, a lot of
good
times
at all the things. Yeah,
they're a great musician, they're a great performer, but they are not timely, or they, are punctual, I guess,
or can't even put together a well put together email. Like, you know,
Right,
maybe
right.
their communication style is really artsy, which is
Yeah.
what makes them a great artist. But the business side of things
Right.
is a void there.
Yeah,
So.
or they don't know, you know, anything about contracts, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I mean, one of the biggest things that they've taught us, just as a little tidbit, is it's always worth it to have an entertainment lawyer
Okay.
look at your contracts, because you know it may be, you may look at it and be like, it, for example, if, you know, we always hear about artists getting, you know, kind of screwed in a sense of on their contract, they don't get the right percentages that they should be getting as the artist or as the writer. They're getting rid of their writing credibility or whatever it is. So an entertainment lawyer is always going to be your best bet on looking at contracts, because they are literally, their entire job is to look at contracts and make sure that you're getting what you deserve out of the contract.
Well, and that, man, it is such an art to being able to just interpret what the heck a contract is saying, because, you know, the lingo in contracts,
The legalese.
it's so confusing
The word legalese
and
is even
straightforward at the same time. It's like they're saying the most mundane thing ever in the most difficult way possible.
Right.
Well, you know, there's contracts for bookings, and then there's contracts for publishing. There's contracts for, there's different, you know, for festival bookings are different than a small venue. Like, and we teach a lot of that in the Entertainers Academy about how to at least have it in some form of writing, even if it's not some formal contract. It needs, you need to explicitly state out what you agreed on. If it was verbal, especially, just send an email, or worst case, a text message that says, we agreed to this date, this time, this amount of money, I'm bringing the sound, or you're providing it, whatever it is, put it on your calendar. And then that can, you know, it is in writing at that point. Now, the best case is you've got a full-on contract, and we've got some contract templates that we share with other indie artists. But when you start getting in the big leagues, I'm sure entertainment law is more and more important.
Oh, goodness,
the worst thing is like locking into a deal. Like if somebody approaches you and says, I want to be your manager, I want to sign you to my label or whatever, like that you don't end up signing something that is, I've heard so many nightmares of artists who can't get their music that they recorded, and it took them 10 years to get that. And it's like they were, you know, lost all that valuable time in their life. So, well, you know, those are the pros of having a team, but let's talk about the cons of a team. As an independent artist starts developing a team, I think one of my immediate thoughts are like losing creative control. What are your thoughts on that? You know, when you go to sign with the team or build your team, what things should you be making sure you don't end up, you know, with a con situation?
Yeah, so making sure that you have a reliable team obviously is important. But I think one of the biggest things, I mean, in my experience, is making sure that artist or artists trust you to make creative judgment calls, or make sure that you're getting the work done that they want you to. Like, I remember whenever I first started, obviously I didn't have near as many skills as I have now with photography and videography. But I mean, just making sure that you have people that you trust and that are reliable and
see your
are just
artistic
willing to,
vision.
and they see what you want to have as your goal, or, you know, they see that, you know, you can take them from point A to point B.
And take them out of having to do that role, so they can trust you to go and do, like with our VA now, she develops content, and she knows now, she's done it enough with us for about 4 months where she's like, she knows what I like and what kind of fonts and just everything. She gets it. And I sometimes I just trust her to go send an email on my behalf, not necessarily a personal email, but one that just represents our brand, and it's spot on. It sounds like everything that I would want it to say. So reliability and trustworthiness, and then on brand. You know, one of the cons I think about, and one of the things I think that really is important, especially in the day and age of digital being so important to brands, is that I feel like the big artists that are doing really well, I feel so connected to them personally still, even though I know they have a huge team and I know they're a major label artist. But when they'll get on and they'll pop on and they might record a video and they're talking straight to that camera, and I feel like they're talking right to me. And that to me is so important. And so losing a potential con, in my opinion, would be, or my fear would be, if we were to ever be at that level, the feeling like I've lost that connection with my fan base. And there are artists that still do this very well on major levels. Taylor Swift, Lainey Wilson. Who else would you think that does a great job?
I'm trying to think.
you know,
Chris Stapleton does a pretty good job of that most of the time.
Yeah. And I think that's just as simple as your team prioritizing you getting on camera and speaking to your fans, or developing a chance for them to meet and greet with you after a concert, or
I
just
think,
not having 3 levels between you and the
Right.
fan.
Well, I think in some teams, whoever the coordinator is, I think they somehow focus too much on the flashy and the perception, and they lose sight of the real of who the artist is and why they got
So it could be a
started.
misalignment of brand and who the artist. And then
I think with Denise, like it's there are certain team members that you can bring on, and you just know that it's not gonna work.
Yeah,
they're not gonna get the vision. But she, when she first came on, there might have been 1 or 2 things where we're like, no, but she's like, oh, okay, I get it. Get where we're going, and she's
and
able
I love
to
that
fix
we
it
found
really
a good
quickly.
team member as a major label artist. Losing the ability to be in control of your creative. I mean, that could be a potential situation. So there's a lot of things we don't know as independent artists. We're just now starting to develop our team, and I always love visiting with you about what you're learning in college, and we love to learn from you and study what you're working on. I mean, I know there's so much to this, and I just kind of wanted to touch on the team building, because you are a valued team member of ours.
She's also valid.
She's valid. She's valid and valued. And we're excited. So what's next, Ainsley? I know you're going to graduate early, right? And where do you see yourself in a couple years, and what are you thinking you're going to be doing after you leave college and go into the real world?
Yeah, so it's kind of scary, but I should be graduating a semester early, which would be December of 2025. So I'm going into my junior year essentially now for a semester, and then spring will be senior year, and then in the summer of 2025, hopefully the plan for me is to be able to get an internship in Nashville with the help of our entertainment department. Jana Malone is our chair director. I don't know what her actual title is. So sorry about that. But she's supposed to help coordinate and make sure everybody's where they need to be. And one of the biggest things that they say is you want to have your internship in a place that you plan on working after. So obviously if I choose Nashville, I plan on working in Nashville after. I love the city. Little Rock is not necessarily too small, but I've been here my whole life, and I kind of want to get into something that is the downtown area is focused on music all the time.
Yeah.
Well, in specific, downtown Broadway is a different beast than outside where you get the singer-songwriter, but working with being in a city that's a music city with opportunities for you to become part of a team, internship with maybe someone who can get your foot in the door with a company that eventually places you into a spot in a role that you would love, and be able to become an artist, a team member of an artist, and maybe under one of these roles that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Really excited for you, and it's just been really cool to watch you evolve and grow. And we gave her the title content coordinator. Now that I've read through my list, I feel like you're more a social media strategist, but I don't know. I still like content coordinator.
Yeah,
it's a good ring.
And most recently, you guys can check out some of her work on our Arkansas CMA appearance. And
she got some great video.
While
Luckily,
we saw
were
your brown,
sitting real close up, so it turned out really
and
well.
then she took the photos and videos for our opening spot at Greer's Ferry Lake Fest for Sawyer Brown. And so, once again, here we are, indie artists trying to figure out how to create great content around ourselves so that we can, number one, look professional, have high resolution video and photos to not only promote ourselves, but, when you have that kind of level of work that you're providing for us, Ainsley, it helps us look like professionals, and then we can continue to grow and charge more price, charge a greater price, and start to get more opening acts like we did for Sawyer Brown. So we really appreciate you being on the podcast. Did I leave anything out?
I don't know if we've left anything out. I mean, I'm sure we have. Well, yeah, we haven't talked about what their roles are.
I mean, we've got 3 little dogs.
Charlie and Gibby, and Booker's
in the
he's
floor.
in the floor.
And y'all
He's
know we
good.
have 3 little
Booker,
dogs.
Wait, there you go.
see him?
He's right
And
down there somewhere.
I told Ainsley, I said, well, where does the dog manager come in? Because for us, I know we will have made it if we have a dog manager. Like
Well,
someone
you know, you have nannies that watch your kids if
Yeah,
you're a big
those are our
artist, so we need a
children.
dog nanny.
dog
Yeah.
nanny would be that would be the title.
DN, dog name.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we were like, if we end up on the road, we'd have to have an RV and the dog's
Yeah.
in the RV. But then what are we going to do when we're anyway? So
Yeah.
we have 3 little ones, and just for the
Yeah.
record, I know this to be the case, but which one is your favorite?
Charlie's my favorite.
Charlie Daniels is her favorite.
Why? Tell us why.
Because he's just always happy to see me, and
He is.
Booker runs away from me when I try to pick him up. Sometimes.
Oh yeah, Booker.
he
He's
runs away
elusive.
from everybody, but
He's very elusive.
I think they all love me, but
Yeah.
but Charlie loves me the most.
Well, speaking of dog nanny, we're taking advantage of Ainsley once more.
Yes.
And she's going to be staying at our house and watching our dogs for
Well,
quite a
we're-
few trips now.
Yeah, we're going to Nashville, we're going to Chicago, and we're going to Santa Barbara. And I'm like,
All of
Ainsley,
July,
I'll
yeah.
pay you a daily rate to come live in my house, and so I don't have to. But yeah, so you've done so much for us, and so tell everybody how they can find you online. Where can we, follow along to join your journey and see your work?
Yeah, so on pretty much all platforms, it's just at Ainsley Meldrum, and that's AINSLEY. Meldrum is MELDRUM. That's just first name, last name.
Yep.
On TikTok, Instagram. I am labeled as Ainsley Meldrum Music and Media on Facebook because my personal one is my first name, last name.
Yeah.
But
So yeah, they can find you, and we'll tag you. You guys, if you're watching this, just click below, and we'll have all of her links so you can follow along with Ainsley's story. And we're just excited for your future. And thanks for joining and talking shop
Thanks for
and
having me.
putting up with us trying to find multiple cameras in the
Yeah.
studio. I think she learned how to produce a podcast today
Turned out
too.
all right. Yeah.
I think
We've
we
got
did
some improvements to do.
We're all,
I gotta teach Gibby or Charlie or Booker how to push these buttons. Is what I need to do.
Yeah, well, they're pretty useless. As long as they're being quiet, they've done a good job.
Yeah,
so.
no, they are doing their job.
Well, you guys, thank you for listening to our episode today with Ainsley Meldrum, and we will sign off for now. And I don't know who our next interviewee will be, but we're always loving to share other stories. We talked about bringing on some songwriters next time and
Yeah.
letting them perform and maybe sharing some music. So we've got a few of our friends, and just shout out to everybody who supports us. As independent artists, it always means a lot when you listen, subscribe, follow, listen to our music, share our music, buy our t-shirts. We've got some new hats coming up. But we are Cliff and Susan everywhere: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of the things. You can find our debut album on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and more. We will see you guys next time.